Welcome to my talk. I'm Thomas, and I want to spread some of my knowledge today and share my previous experience, hoping that some of the insights will resonate with some of you guys. I wanted to choose a more classic setup for tonight, as I had to buy this one for one of our last meetups, and I really like the idea of having old school slides, and actually it really resonates, or it really is a good fit to the talk and what the things I planned. I also prepared my talk in a way that it's more like a literary reading style. So I also wanted to take this and use it as as a specific style and setting, and feel a little bit more cozy and a little bit more like a guy who's just telling a story. So here I am. So if you look at my career, you can see me as you can see my experience as an interaction designer for BMW, working on in-car interfaces, and later as a UX designer and founder of my own design studio, Envis Precisely. I was working on everything interactive, from apps to media installations, and in addition to design, I also took care of all business kind of tasks back then, as a managing director, from legal to client acquisition, proposal creation, account management, and growing a team of smart 7 guys. More recently, you could see me as a head of UX for a Munich-based startup called Glaeser, where my role quickly expanded. I was in charge of customer development as well, design and business strategy, business development as well, growing and working with my design team. We started with self-improvement tools like coaching spaces. You can look it up in the internet. And then successfully pivoted to co-spaces. Sounds a little bit familiar. It's actually was the same technology used in the back. But then we switched to a VR creation tool, so nothing with coaching anymore. So before I move on and continue my own innovation consultancy, as Betty mentioned, I wanted to use this moment to pause and reflect a little bit with you guys and share my key learnings from the last 4.5 years at the startup. As I was thinking about my learnings, this was actually one of the hardest things I've ever done, and I've ever got my head around kind of things. I started to write things down multiple times, then destroyed everything and this is shit, I want to share some of my experience, but I don't know how. Finally, I came up with a framework that helped me to reflect. It's based on Kate Aronowitz. She's a design partner at Google Ventures, and she prioritized 4 things. It's actually the user, the business, the team, and the self as a conversation starter for her team discussions. And I personally see this more like equal elements. So she put it like a prioritization list, like user, then business, and so on. So I came up with my own kind of framework. Wait a second, I have to switch slides. Bear with me. There we are. Can you see it? Perfect. Yeah, and I printed it out for you guys as well. So this is actually the framework. I see it like 4 equal circles arranged with me or you in the center. So you can use it like a game board. That's why I also brought a game piece here. So that's the starting point. You can put it here if you want to kind of start your reflect journey. So you can take each spot, take a deep breath before you start. So this is what I did. I had a couple of meditation rounds first, and then listening to whatever comes up when you go to come to a certain point. So let's start with the user and see whatever comes up here. What I've learned about dealing with users is that that it's really important to create a close connection to users. So if you have a great connection with a user, the product solution becomes more feasible. For CoSpaces, it turned out that our majority of our users are teachers, and that's why I've created this special CoSpaces education version as well. So the good thing was actually that I didn't have to convince them to use it. Like before, we had this tool called Coaching Spaces, where we had to go out, so like, hey, you see guys, this is so cool and you have to use it. The good thing about CoSpaces, and the good thing in general, if you have a good working product, the people just come and use it and spread the word on their own. So once a CoSpaces user told me that, Thomas, don't worry about the design, we will fix it, we will tell you when something is not working, and they did. And they did it a lot. So I learned to digest tons of feedback, including feature requests and bug reports, and I tried to somehow list it and prioritize it and make sense out of it, but it was just too much. So if you have a successful product and lots of people using it, you get just like buried under a lot of kind of feedback and requests. The thing is that if you have like lots of requests, some things keep repeating and come often, more often than others. So clear patterns emerge, and this is actually already enough for a startup to digest. So the learning here is actually that core requests or changes should be possible to recall at any time. So the team had always like the core things we should fix in the back of our heads. In addition, I learned or realized that I shouldn't believe everything users say, especially opinions and hypothetical remarks like, oh, I could imagine to use this. There's a nice book called The Mom Test. Who of you knows The Mom Test? Hands up. Ooh, you don't know? You should. It's a must read. So this book was a real eye-opener for me in the process of developing CoSpaces. I started to ask for real actions. So how do you really use it? And sorting out polite from honest feedback. And finally, always asking for someone else to talk to. I began to look more critically at solutions that users bring up. Especially if you talk a lot to users, they tend to come up with solutions first before they actually talk about the real problem they have. And there's also a nice technique called the 5 whys. Who knows this one? 5 why? Perfect. So this is really helpful to get to the cause of a problem. So what's really the problem? Tell me why. And then they usually also tend to answer or reply to you with a more fluffy answer, and then say, okay, but why really? And say, I use it because it's cool. What is cool about it? And so on. And also be careful with people users when they suggest you feedback like, hey, can you make the sharing like Google Docs does? Without any details why they actually need it this way. It doesn't mean that user solutions are always bad. I just want to say, be careful with it and find out the real problem. And maybe in our case, it was actually what the majority expected. So it can be a user solution can be a good solution. Finally, about users, I learned to look close for an opportunity when people are misusing our product. So the idea for CoSpaces actually came because kids of our team members were using our coaching tool for telling stories. So I can always say, like, please look out, and whatever tool you're currently working on, when people try to misuse it for something else, this can be a really interesting way to pivot or do something else. So this is how we switched from a coaching tool to a tool, VR building tool for kids, just by observing and finding out hacks. Let's talk about the product. So the product aspect of a design leadership, I found out that through transition from like my design agency to a product team, actually, I learned to support the product through the whole life cycle. When I was a consultant first, I was always hired for like 2-3 month project, but now I really learned what it is to be at a product team for like 4 or 5 years, continuously improving it, continuously dealing with developers, dealing with users, dealing with management, and so on. So with CoSpaces, I finally saw the product grow fast to lots of new monthly signups. During coaching spaces time, we didn't have this rapid growth. Only some people telling us how cool we are. And this is also something I learned. Be careful. No matter the state of your product, there are always some die-hard fans who will love it and say you're the best. And don't be fooled by that. Additionally, I realized that my voice, the UX perspective, mattered during product meetings because I was very closely interacting with our user base. And this made me an important part of the meetings. It was not just having a seat at the table. I also had a seat at the table and was part of decision making because of that. So if you want to have a more important role in what you're doing, if you are the advocate of your user, then it can really help you to advance into kind of management and founder level rounds. Being involved in those product decisions, actually, I learned to be pragmatic. Pragmatic can be something very good, especially if you work at a startup. In the beginning, I felt the need to do something about every user request, about every product flaw, every customer wish. But actually, this was before I experienced that changing nothing is always a good option. So sometimes just saying like, okay, we will not fix that. And to live with this was something I had to learn, actually. And this pragmatic approach towards change is important at a fast-paced startup, and it's also important to break complex tasks down to small steps to help the feature actually getting developed. For example, we had this huge thing we found out we definitely need for teachers. It's a classroom management feature which was released last year. And we split it into several small steps like setting up a class, defining a class assignment, etc., etc. So when you look for the next step, pick the lower-hanging fruits first. And the method of user story mapping, who's familiar with user story mapping? Okay, quite a fair amount. Can be pretty helpful for this to find out like what's the core feature you want to do next. So as we moved forward with product development, I observed that there can be a tendency towards overthinking decisions. So I really learned the value of coaching methods, for example, like systemic constellations. Who of you heard of systemic constellations? You heard? Great. Everyone else? I can highly recommend to have a look at systemic constellations and being part of a constellation session. So in Munich, there are, by the way, some evening events you can just join and see what it does to you. It's called Aufstellungsabend here in Munich. You can Google it. It's pretty cool. Usually it's for free or it costs like 20 or 30 euros and you can figure it out. So this is a solution-focused approach to problem solving, and it actually forms, or people in a room form the solution form of an image. Hard to describe, but if you can Google it and figure it out and just experience it yourself. So actually this method helped me to connect with my intuition. So it's really based on feelings instead of like rationalizing a certain outcome. So feeling into opportunities had a more successful impact on decision making than actually thinking. So we use this quite a lot to make decisions. Then business, which is actually a very... So let's talk about business. before I finished my design studies, I had 2 degrees in business administration. Somehow I saw business as something evil, like most of my fellow students after design. Probably had something to do with how our university treated design and business, so they always kind of separated it. So I was kind of probably brainwashed, and then 2010, a friend introduced me to the business model generation book, which is 8 years later still the standard for how you think about businesses. And I'm using this framework to define businesses around products, actually. So who's actually familiar with business model generation, the book? Okay, cool. So if you have the customer and the product value in the center of the business model process, actually matched my understanding of user-centered design pretty much. So there was nothing evil about business anymore. I also learned that a good user experience can save a lot of marketing effort, because actually a good tool just spreads by itself. And this is how I saw it with CodeSpaces. We just put it out, and it organically spreads. So we didn't have to do much, actually. On the other hand, a business needs more than just a great UX to get traction. So we played around with different kind of marketing channels. So if you are concerned about the success of the business in general as a designer, you should also care about how you communicate your offer, and how you can find partners who can help you grow. So actually, in my opinion, design doesn't stop at like designing, polishing a product. It goes beyond that. There's also something to do with communication and business development, and finding partners help you grow. So additionally, I have learned to apply my design thinking to our business model, starting with a prototype and continuing with user testing worked well, with everything from revenue model to product brochures. I was role-playing, for example, to test the experience at our event booth, or I was simply running some usertesting.com sessions on a landing page where we tested early ideas just to get a first kind of feedback very quick. So setting up services as a concierge MVP, or creating video stories around some features which just don't exist yet, were other ways how we tested acceptance. So before we just build, you can already see if this thing what you wanted to have, if the idea everyone has in their heads is really what the market needs. So you can treat business like another design problem which needs to be solved. Finally, I learned to be patient. Evolving and growing a business actually takes time. And usually if you hear it from other people saying like, we have this investment round for like 1 year, and then afterwards, I don't know what to do. So I believe actually it takes a lot of time to develop a good product, a sustainable business. I saw it with my own design studio. I saw it with the Lightix products and with startups around me. It can easily take around 4 to 5 years to turn an idea into a viable business, or even longer if you have to pivot multiple times. So back then in coaching spaces times, we tried different kind of products. So on the other hand, this doesn't mean that you shouldn't test and get feedback as quickly as possible. So it takes time to build something, but in between you always have to kind of rapidly prototype and test, and always check like if you're going to the right direction. So don't waste time in building complex features nobody probably needs. One thing I learned most about is actually team building. So if you go to this spot, as I joined the Lightix, which was at that time a handful of people, I asked the founder, so it was actually only me and the founder, as I was the only designer there, and I was responsible for executing all the design tasks back then, from communication design to product design, from making the website to brochures, features, pixel perfect specs, everything. So at some point, I reached my limit in terms of capacity, of course, and had to bring in more people to help me out. So in the beginning, I filled each position as quickly as possible, just to get some space. But soon I felt the downside of this, rushing through and building a team quick. When a design review ends up needing to be the things have to be redesigned and redone every time, and you just micromanage and see yourself sitting there for 1 or 2 hours discussing one simple feature, I somehow felt that something was wrong. So after our pivot to co-spaces, the product, I started to focus also on recruiting different kind of people then. So it was actually a good turning point for the team in general, that we switched from a complete different customer segment to a new customer segment, which was also gave us a chance to also redefine the team. Before we had psychologists on the team, we didn't need psychologists for kids VR creation tool, for example. So after our pivot to co-spaces, I learned also to say no multiple times in the process. So this was also not so easy, because when you have people there, they already did some homework, or I don't know, they already advanced quite far, and then finally you said no, because I didn't want to have this feeling again that you sit with someone in a design meeting and it takes too long, and I really wanted to find the perfect fit, the really best people. So I made coding prototypes a key skill for interaction designers. This was, I think, one of the best moves. This actually led me to a expected timeline of 6 to 9 months for finding a new designer. But in the end, making coding a key skill for designers improved the team communication drastically. So the way how we designed and the way how designers spoke with developers in the process was much easier and much faster. So as a result, my team gave me more space actually to do research and customer and business development. So hiring smart people actually helped me to do things I wanted to do back then. Don't be afraid to hire people who are smarter than you. And if team members can't adapt after some months, you can let them go. This is also something I had to learn. So I would suggest this mantra, hire slow, fire fast. This doesn't mean, I had a discussion about it with some people. It's wow, fire fast, what do you mean with that? It doesn't mean that you should abandon your employees as quickly as possible. It simply means that you have to cut it as soon as you feel that the relationship is draining far more energy than it's able to return. So if you really have the feeling that there's something not working out, cut it and don't wait too long. I had this experience that we were waiting far too long before releasing someone, and it was better for the team, it was better for everyone. And I don't know, I think in the beginning it was, okay, it's hard to say someone he's fired, but it's not good for this specific person. It's also not good for the team if you just try to hold this person somehow in the team as long as possible. This is what I want to say. So if you have very smart people around you, this requires also step up in management. So besides weekly reviews, I facilitated monthly one-on-one meetings with each team member. We reflected on what's successful and what can be improved on both ends. So it's not only feedback hey, I give you feedback how good you were. It was also how good was I actually as a team lead. So it's important to meet your team member on a regular basis on an eye level, because smart people, again, are smart, and I think they did some things I never was able to do. So I think it's just fair to meet on an equal level. As a result from these monthly exchanges, actually I figured out that my design team at some point felt disconnected, which was interesting because we were all sitting in the same room. So one designer had the idea to create and lead their own show and tell session every Friday. Every Friday afternoon for like half an hour, 1 hour, updating each other's about what we improved, what happened this week. And this really improved the whole communication in the team. And weeks later, I entered the design unit and I found my team members in lively discussions on their own. And that's where I felt I had succeeded as a manager. When you can like step out, step back, and the whole thing works on its own. So give your smart team the freedom to rule themselves, and it will empower them as a whole. And thanks to my team, I was able to expand my role and start to wear many more hats. So my work overlapped with other team members like marketing or communications and development. So some of those people are extroverted, some are introverted, some need boundaries, some love to have freedom. So if you work with so many different kinds of people, I had to learn when to switch between different modes of communication. And I also learned to respect that everyone is fighting a battle on their own. So sometimes you don't know what's behind it, but you should respect it and treat each other with respect. So furthermore, I had to communicate effectively with people at all levels in our business. I had to learn to find a balance between proactively bringing in new ideas and listening carefully to what other leaders have to say and respect decisions as well. So even if I don't agree personally, this is something completely else. So it's not about me, it's about maintaining a good feeling within the team and focusing on the overall success. So as a product, there's a nice saying that a product is like a mirror of the team. And if you look at like maybe products you're working on, or if you look at other products, I think it fits quite well. So if your team communication is a little bit messy, then usually the tools are a little bit messy as well, and vice versa. So keep this in mind so that the product is a mirror of the team, because your customers will see it. Let's come to the last point, it's the self. Ta-da! So I want to close this journey with a topic that is sometimes hard to understand, the self. For example, back in design school, I was trained to design for perfection. But reality taught me that only designers actually know this. So when I showed some of the designs of what we brought pushed out to our customers, they liked it. They said, "Oh, this is fantastic! It's so easy to use. I like it." And then I showed some of my design friends. And, but there's this like 1 millimeter something here, and I was like, "Phew, no one of our customers cares." So especially in a startup where resources are scarce, I had to learn to be okay with a good enough design. So, for example, we started with lots of inconsistent customizations around Twitter Bootstrap as a first draft for the user interface. But it was good enough to get first customers and first clients, and it's okay. So every time I could concentrate on one product and like pivoting from various self-improvement tools to one tool, actually, it got the best out of me and out of the team as well. So focus on one thing, doing it right, and then care about perfection later, is what I learned. I also learned not to take feedback from unhappy users too personally, even if I was responsible for that solution or feature. Negative feedback isn't about me. So this is something I really had to learn to like differentiate. I tried to take feedback with the understanding that I simply didn't have enough information to do it right. And actually be kind and grateful for the feedback and simply try to fix it. it's a great opportunity, or actually people coming to you and say like, hey, you did something wrong, or this thing doesn't work, is a great opportunity to build close relationships. So we really had like good user feedback, like actually bad user feedback turned into a great user company relationship afterwards. So sometimes I also found myself procrastinating on tasks. You probably know this. You have like nice team members showing you YouTube videos. So I've learned to ask myself actually what I'm actually doing instead of what's necessary to move on. So this is a good question you can ask yourself, why you are doing things, because usually there's always a good reason behind it. So I learned to listen to my inner team. I'm not sure who's familiar with the inner team coaching method. So you can actually treat yourself as a whole team, and inside of you there are different kinds of voices who want to say something or who want something, and it's not only one voice who wants something in a specific moment. So if you are aware of that fact, and if you are trying to listen to your inner team, it can really help you to find a blocker or what's holding you back, and continue with the task. So if you see yourself as a team of people, it can help you to begin to manage yourself in a similar way, like you manage your team. And finally, I realized that designing in a bubble doesn't benefit anyone. And what I mean with this is that I often found myself sitting in my comfy chair, listening to my jazz playlist while I'm designing on my latest MacBook. And seriously, I mean, how can you make good design decisions if you always work in the same setting? So I used to walk around the office, sit in different kinds of rooms, at least, try different kinds of working scenarios, sometimes work from home, also change the equipment. So for CoSpaces EDU, our users were teachers. They had Chromebooks, for example. So I also spent some time just working on Chromebooks the whole day, just to feel how your users actually feeling, how they work. They don't have the best internet connection all the time. So just try to empathize with the users and get yourself into the shoes and get out of your nice office and give yourself a reality check from time to time. This is truly invaluable. In addition, I focused on working on myself separately from the team and my work environment. So my individual needs may vary, and it may mean you have actually to get coaching or to get therapy. So you can't expect to be a good leader if you are not balanced with yourself. So from time to time, I took hypnosis sessions, I took therapy sessions, I could business coaching sessions, whatever was appropriate at that time. And for everyone, it's different. But I just want to say that it's important to continue working on yourself. And if you want to work on yourself, most of the times you need someone who assists you. So don't expect that you can fix yourself completely. That's actually it from this kind of point of view. Let's return to the start. The start is actually a finish, and so on, and vice versa. So as I continue my journey now as a consultant working on the intersection of business and design again, as a freelancer, I hope you could learn something from what I told you, from my experiences so far. I hope some things resonated with you, even if you aren't working in business, or maybe not in design, or if you don't have a leadership position or not, or if you have one. Overall, I'm very grateful for all my experiences and the chance that I had to meet people actually who already achieved what I wanted to achieve. And I think this is very important when you look for a new job, or you're currently reviewing your current working environment. Look if there are interesting people besides you. If you the only smart person in the meeting, and you cannot learn anything from someone else, I think this is a moment where I should start questioning if I'm in the right environment, actually. So I would recommend this reflection exercise to evaluate your own experiences, actually. And I think it can be extremely valuable for everyone, regardless of what industry level or business you are in. So if you want, you can... Now comes my next slide. It's actually the funny part. I forgot this slide. And I had to go to the copy shop and say like, hey, I forgot one slide to print. Oh, ta-da. So this is where you can find the reflection activity. And yeah, you can use it, you can remix it, you can make it your own. I talked with some of my design friends and showed it to them as well. Ta-da. Some, for example, said, well, I would not make 5 points, I would only make 3 points out of it. It's not about the business, or it's not about user and self. I see it a little bit different. But overall, I would say having yourself in the middle and having like some core points around you and just like diving in, thinking about it, reflecting a little bit, in general helps. And if you want to copy paste this is like my thing, which worked for me pretty well, and maybe it works for you as well. But if it doesn't work, feel free to remix it. So thank you very much.